Hey guys, this is the last video that I'm going to put out before Iowa, obviously, because that's happening on Monday. This is being recorded on the Saturday immediately prior. And I want to just take a little bit of time and talk about what I expect to happen out of Iowa based on some of the short form videos that I put out, based on some of the things that I've talked about in the Discord and on X, and some of the things that I've talked about on Contemporary, because well, I'm actually going to be completely honest with that. I don't know what's going to happen. I've been very, very certain about a lot of things politically. And I've been analyzing this now for, where are we on? It's 2023, for 5 years. 2024. It's been 6 years, good God. Anyway, I've been analyzing this for 6 years, and a lot of the things that have happened in the past, such as honk honk, 2020, and this video is going on YouTube, so I'm not going to take it too far beyond that, but mirroring what happened in 2018 with Tony Evers and Scott Walker, I called that one pretty much as soon as they said the words mail-in ballot for the first time. I'm not going to tell you what I called, but, well, again, we're on a YouTube video, so there are some things out there that cannot be said verbatim. Even if they're not against the TOS right now, one of the things to keep in mind with YouTube is that they will change the TOS on the fly and retro-enforce it against your videos. I just had another episode of Contemporary taken down, and I'm sure it had to do with the holy jab. And when I appealed, it took them 2.4 seconds to say, no, fuck you, you're rejected. Anyway, going on to Iowa. Some things have shifted over the past few days. The Nikki Haley debate should have pushed her further down below DeSantis, honestly. I think objectively, I think that DeSantis did run away with that, but either way, it's not going to be enough to take either one of them to the top of the ticket, except maybe in a couple of states. But Iowa and to an extent New Hampshire, I think, are going to be funny and fickle as we go. What I mean when I say that is, well, first off, I did anticipate, and my numbers for the end of Iowa haven't changed. I revised them down a little bit tighter over the past, I would say, when did I make my first prediction? 3-4 months ago? When I said it was going to be Trump, but it was going to be Trump plus a very narrow margin, and I said plus 6% at the time. I have taken that down to plus 3%, with the opportunity as to whoever I would anticipate would have been otherwise the second place finisher could very, very, very narrowly eke out a win, but I would anticipate that it would be within 1% if the next contender in polling were to win. And I assumed that was going to be Ron DeSantis, based on the fact that there is so much effort online, especially over on X, to make sure that DeSantis fans and Trump fans hate each other. My original anticipation was, and this goes on to the fact that Iowa is not doing anything for Democrats on the same day. Iowa's primary for Democrats is later on in the cycle, later on in the year. And they said that was because they didn't want the racist white people in Iowa to be the first people to vote. They didn't say the word racist, but they said that they didn't want lily white Iowa to vote first. But realistically, and I still look at this, and I never attribute, let's say, incompetence to where malice should be, and vice versa, malice where incompetence is. I never attribute that to where it is, but I do look at the fact that all these Democrats in Iowa right now are not going out and they're not going to the polls. They have, especially with the polar vortex coming in, they have nothing to do on that day. Most of them probably aren't going to be going to work that day. And by the way, it's going to be cold. And when they did this, of course, they had no idea what the weather was going to be like that weekend. That just seems to be a handy bonus to this. But when I look at Iowa and I look at the fact, and I talked about this on a topic chat in the Discord, which if you're not in the Discord, this link is in the description below. You can come back in and join the conversation. That I thought that a lot of Democrats are going to register Republican for a day, and they're being pushed, by the way, by TDS Republican influencers, Democrat influencers, a lot of people who are coming out and saying that Donald Trump is a unique evil and we need to stop him at all costs whatsoever to do so. And if he has a bad showing in the first few states, he might actually drop out. But I do think that the polling margin is wide enough that he still ekes it out. I think it's going to be narrower than MAGA wants, which is where I got the plus 3% from it. That's where I pulled that number from, is plus 3. Given the fact that there are going to be some Hong Kong extra voters that come into this. But I also don't necessarily believe it's going to be Ron DeSantis anymore. And I had a little bit of a, we'll call it a shower thought about this, because my mind is constantly running when I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about what content's going to go into contemporary, what's going to go into short form videos like this. I'm constantly thinking, I'm constantly analyzing, and for the most part, I'm constantly listening to news coverage from some other creators who are more independent, let's say. They're not completely independent. I know that two of the creators that I occasionally listen to are all in on Trump. But I keep thinking more and more, and I actually had to put my Democrat hat on to think about this and to figure out what one of the possible outcomes of this is. And think back to the way that my mind worked when I was 19 years old and voted reliably for Democrats, including door knocking for Gore and Kerry. And that is the fact that, realistically, the best thing that could happen for the Democrat Party right now would be for Nikki Haley to become the president. Now, hear me out. Because that may be a stretch even for the most tinfoily of conspiracy theorists. But hear me out for this. And I think back to what was happening when I was 19 years old. In 2003, in a very, very liberal college that I was going to at the time, in the UW system down in Kenosha, I was just sitting in one of the commons doing some studying because my roommates were constantly stoned and partying. But I was sitting in the commons doing some studying one day, and I actually saw the march from the day of the invasion. A group of students with a banner marching up and down the halls in this school, chanting, "All that we're saying is give peace a chance." I actually wrote one of my very first published political articles about that particular instance. It's kind of what got me going through this and going through the motions and deciding I wanted to analyze this in an amateur fashion, not necessarily a professional fashion. But I watched this happen. And I remembered back when Democrats were, for lack of a better term, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful of this, the peaceniks, the people who protested the war, the people who didn't want us to go into any other foreign theater, that we need to go help ourselves, we need to cut the military-industrial complex because we can use that money to redistribute wealth, and all this, that, and the next thing, all the fun Marxist ideals that happened out of the Democrat College. And then, fast forward now to 2022, with the invasion of Ukraine from Vladimir Putin. Was it 21? I'm sorry, it was 2021, not 2022. Wow, it's been going on for a long time. With the, quote, invasion of Ukraine, and again, I can make an entire short-form video about my thoughts on that and why I don't think that's what we're being presented to as well, but how bloodthirsty and how absolutely all in Democrats are for us staying in there. And it's a full-on departure from where Democrats were in 2003 when I was still pulling that lever reliably for D. And I myself have remained anti-war. Democrats have not. But that's the kind of thought that started my mind thinking to myself, hey, what kind of an advantage would they have if Nikki Haley was the president? Because Nikki Haley is an avid warmonger. She's been open about this. She has a list of all the countries that she wants to put our troops in to keep the peace in the world, especially with what's happening between Israel and Palestine right now, but also what's happening between the Yemenis and the Houthis. We are looking very, very, very hard at the idea that we might be going to war in the Middle East again, based on what happened with the UK and the US and the Houthi rebels in Yemen at this point. But Democrats themselves are in an identity crisis. They have to pretend that they're not anti-war anymore, in spite of the fact that, yes, they would love to come back out here and cut the military-industrial complex and not send their generation into the Middle East to die. I think a few of them are looking at themselves and the age that they're at and realizing, hey, if we go into a major world war, my card is up on the draft, and I'm going to wind up, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull a mental health excuse off of this one, or a student excuse if we go into this full thing. So, from a Democrat standpoint, it would be advantageous, especially with the Middle East being in play, for the Republican or for the president in 2024 to be a Republican, because then they can go back and protest the war. They can protest and try to avoid the draft and say, we don't want to go for another war, give peace a chance, no more wars for oil or anything else like that, and maintain their old position. Now, they could possibly even still, with a clean conscience, come back out and hold their support for the Ukraine based on the fact that Putin man bad. Although that war is faltering to a close at some point here as well. But they could still justify that. But with the Middle East getting ready to pop off, and of course Taiwan, and trying to send us into an Asian theater as well, echoing back to the Nixon and Ford eras, it gives the perfect out and the perfect opportunity for them to look back and say, no, we are anti-war. We don't need to do any more foreign intervention. Fuck off, military-industrial complex and billionaires and Halliburton and all the other things, all the other buzzwords that we heard in 2003, 2004, pretty much right up until the point that Barack Obama got elected. Now, as far as Iowa goes, it's anybody's guess. I'm going to maintain Trump +3 is my official prediction, with a margin of error to bring him down to within a point of winning. Also understanding, again, the bold, distinct possibility that Nikki Haley, I just had a chill run up my spine thinking about that, may actually pull ahead in Iowa to within 1% ahead. The polar vortex, the intense cold that's going to be running through that state on that day is going to be a factor on this. It's going to factor into a lot of the Florida man's crew coming out, knocking on doors, because a lot of them are coming up from the south. They're coming up from Florida, they're coming up from Georgia, they're coming up from places like that into weather that they are not used to. And some of them are actually having trouble getting flights in at the moment because we just had a massive snowstorm up here. For those of you who don't know, I'm 20 minutes away from Iowa right now. I remain in Wisconsin, but I am like 20 minutes away from Iowa. So, as I said, if you're in Iowa and you want to see a specific change, if you want to see a specific outcome, it is incumbent on you to go out and vote. I cannot vote in Iowa because I'm not a resident there. And the three people who are actually in contention, because Chris Christie dropped out, and let's face it, for as much bluster as he has, and a lot of the right things that he says, I like a lot of the things that Vivek says, but Vivek Ramaswamy is not running for the presidency. Vivek Ramaswamy is putting his advertising budget out for 2025. And he is going to have some product, some service out there that MAGA or non-woke can't live without. And his advertising is going to be, you know what? I said a lot of the things that you liked on the campaign trail. Now come back and buy my product, which you cannot live without, because you can either buy it from me or you can go buy it from somebody who's woke, who hates you. I still to this day think that's what Vivek is doing, but we will see. And we will be reconvening to talk about this when Contemporary happens on Tuesday. So come back and join me, 6 p.m. Central Time, live, and we'll discuss what happened on Tuesday and how far off I actually was. And until then, take care, you guys.